Hi, everyone. I'm Sean Tomlinson. I am the proud father of two boys, including a newly minted 4-year-old. He turned 4 yesterday, and he's running around. So if you see me act distracted, it's because I am. He's just so cute. So yes, I had the great good fortune to be able to go to Death Valley National Park in January of this year, because my wife is incredibly generous and lets me go. She stayed home with the boys, and both boys were in school. And this is about my trip out there. This is, we'll see this picture again. This was an amazing night.
You got that tie there, would you click it up a little higher?
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So yes, this is about my trip in January to Death Valley. January is a very good time to go to the hottest, driest place in North America. Or, as my boys saw, it could be also called The Adventures of Geralt. Michael, you want to show him Geralt? So Geralt is my travel buddy. He is a monster hunter. And I think you guys who saw my previous presentation, you remember that my older son, Michael here, gave me a travel buddy so I wouldn't be lonely, and it works. But also because he's a monster hunter and he's kept me safe. I've never seen a monster on my trips. It works pretty well. So yes, I think, Michael, go ahead and say it if you want. So for one thing, I think it's fun. You'll see some cell phone photos. This is with big, heavy camera. That's with cell phone. You can see, of course, it knew to expose for me, but I think it's interesting how different the skies look in this particular setup. I keep turning my head. Maybe that'll work better, so I'm gonna have my head turned the whole time. How's that? All right. Okay. So I got wanderlust anyway. We were all kind of trapped because of the pandemic, and I'm going to keep playing with this thing. Okay. And I was supposed to go to the Faroe Islands between Scotland and Iceland last fall. But because of the, I think it was the Delta surge, I didn't know if I could get into the country, which in this case was actually Denmark. So I had to cancel. Turns out I could have gone. It makes me sad. Well, my wife realized how pathetic I was. I was just really hangdog. So she said, you know what? You should go somewhere else. Yes, Ethan, you have a question. Okay. So I was like, where else could I go in this country that would be really fun? Well, I wanted to go with the tour group just because it's easier. They know where to go. They'll take care of logistics. And it's convenient in this country. I mean, Wichita's not a major airport, but it's not a minor airport either. So hopefully just 2 flights. Wildlife or landscape? Wildlife can be kind of fussy, as those of you who've been up to Maxwell a few times know. Sometimes you'll see all of them, sometimes you'll see none of them. Landscape, it's going to be there. And then wind deal. What do you think?
Faces. How do birds fly? With faces.
Oh, birds fly with their faces. Okay, thank you. All right, now Wendigo, winter, spring, or summer. Well, Death Valley was a really appealing option for me from YouTube videos. Nick Page and Michael Shainville, a couple of photographers who also have really nice YouTube presentations, have been there. They've had beautiful presentations of the beauty of Death Valley. So it was on my radar, certainly. But this group out of Chicago, really out of Chicago, going to Death Valley, has been around for, I think, 10 years or so. And what they do is it's a large conference. Most workshops are small. Am I echoing?
You sound okay to me.
All right. Most workshops are small. It'll be you and like 7, 8, sometimes 4, just a small group, along with 1 or 2 instructors depending on the side of it. Well, this is actually a big conference. It even says conference right there because had a whole bunch of instructors. Some of these folks you may have heard of, some of them maybe you haven't, but it was neat for me to be able to take this time to meet all of them and chat with all of them one-on-one. You see we've got some, shall we say, longtime veterans of landscape photography, Cole Thompson and Bill Neal over there. We've also got some younger folks like Jennifer and Nick, and then, oh, that's right, Michael's not on this page, he was a late edition. But it was neat to have so many different photographers that we could talk to and learn from. And it wound up being interesting with COVID. So Death Valley's in California. Okay, it's in California. And because they were under more strict COVID precautions than we were actually divided up into groups, like classes. And so then the instructors would actually rotate through us, and they take us to different areas that fit their particular interests. Like Sarah, she likes the small scenes, the kind of macro or quasi-macro shots. Nick Page likes the large landscapes. Cole Thompson's black and white specialist. Let's see. Alex Noriega likes the abstracts. So it was really neat to have that experience with a number of different instructors. Okay, for photographers, the obligatory gear slide. Landscape photography, you take a tripod. Preferably a good tripod. Your tripod should cost a couple of $100 please for something out here. We were going to we were going to sand dunes, we were going to mountains, we were going to salt flats. Make sure you have a good tripod. Camera bodies, because I was terrified to change lenses in the desert. I actually took 3 bodies, each with a lens permanently affixed. For landscape, you usually think for landscape you want really, really wide. Well, the problem is that makes everything really, really small. Your cell phones will do that just fine. So I had an ultra wide zoom that I actually used the least out of all my lenses. Ultra wide, less than 24, 25 millimeter, 24, 20 millimeters equivalent. Standard zoom, telephoto zoom, and a macro optional. Longer is better for nature. You'll see like 60 millimeter equivalent. That's for like stuff that doesn't move, like still lifes or copyright work. Then disposable shoots. This one was an interesting one. We had a briefing 2 weeks before we went with some of the instructors, and some of the instructors essentially live at Death Valley all winter because of the different photographic opportunities. They just have their RV and they live at the campground. And they recommended very strongly take disposable shoes. Yeah, fine, you're gonna have some nice boots, but the salt flats eat nice boots. They find it delicious. So just take shoes you don't care about, you just throw them in the trash, which would wound up being really good advice because mine just got full of sand. Lots of layers, of course, and no drone. You can't fly a drone without enormous paperwork in any national park, so just didn't even bother with that. Well, how to get there? It's 1,500 miles away, I think. So I just flew Wichita to Dallas to Vegas. It was really easy on American, no problem. I got there. Thanks to my mom, appreciate it, Mom. Really early on the first day, so I actually had time to then drive with a detour. Oh, it's 1,200 mile detour, 1,200 mile drive, that's right. So my detour was actually, so I flew into Vegas. This thing here is Death Valley. Irritatingly, it didn't pop up. Death Valley is the size of Connecticut, 5,000 something square miles. So I actually had a buddy of mine staying down here. So I said, oh, let's meet at Lone Pine. Lone Pine is interesting because it is the gateway to the Alabama Hills. If you've seen the movie Tremors with these huge underground carnivorous worm things that pop up and eat people, it's kind of both. But anyway, that was my first exposure because it's an enormous granite boulder field, and you'll see a little bit of it. But it's also right at the base of the Eastern Sierra Mountains. It's this sheer rampart of mountains. It's just wonderful to see. And it's also the approach town for the tallest peak in the contiguous United States. Sorry, Colorado. So yes, I flew out there, then I drove the 4 miles through Death Valley, which was actually really fun to just kind of explore it. This was really interesting driving. That was the really tight turns there in the mountains as I was leaving Death Valley. So on the trip to Lone Pine, it was 4 hours, and some of it was really pretty. This is just one of my favorite shots from that drive. I just pulled the car over and just shoot out the window. I like that as the sun was setting over the mountains there on the west side of the park. Well, I got there too late, so I couldn't do landscape photography. So I said, aha, let's do landscape photography. This is Mobius Arch. You'll be seeing a lot of this in upcoming slides, but I wanted to catch this and a little bit of the Milky Way. The shots didn't turn out great. I was tired, not a great opportunity to, not a great circumstance to shoot, but still, I had fun with my friend. And you can fly your drone there because it is not I think it's not quite a state park. It's some other designation. So I thought this was fun. This is some of those enormous boulders. This boulder right here is the size of my house, just for reference for size. We have these boulders back here. We lit them up with just light painting. I had some little high-powered flashlights just to get the Milky Way rising up. But we were tired. And then we knew we were going to get up really early. This that you'll see repeatedly, that's Mount Whitney. That is the tallest peak in the contiguous United States, 14,505. And it's really striking. And I like this one. It's a long exposure. You see the little star trails up there behind. That was fun to get out there early enough to catch. Because then we had hike out to Mobius Arch. It's a very stereotypical shot. I still think it's a really neat shot. There's Mount Whitney right there, but then what I like is how different the colors were. I didn't, as you can tell, the composition did change. This is actually over here is Lone Pine Peak, which is not nearly as tall as you think it is. Mount Whitney is really far away. The colors didn't render very well. Shoot. All right. Anyway, So this, I like this change. So this was alpenglow right there. And then this is the first, as you can see, blush of dawn as it's coming up. Stayed in the same place and just enjoyed the sunrise. It was really neat to see. There's some long exposures just sitting on the tripod, no problem. Then once the sun was up fully, I decided to play a little bit with black and white. I thought this one was neat with the twist in the arch, but with no other context. I thought that one was fun. Just continuing to work the scene. There's my buddy Gerald, of course, a little cell phone selfie. I'm a millennial. After all, I have to take selfies. I'm sorry. Way back over here, that's Mount Whitney, and then that's Lone Pine Peak right there. Just a fun one. So for the boys, it was really convenient. I was 2 hours behind Central Time, which was really convenient. So I get up really early, 5 a.m. to go out and go shoot at dawn, which is something like 7 local time. Well, at 7 o'clock here, where they're getting up and ready to go to school. So it worked out perfectly for me to talk to them. And I'd take lots of pictures on the phone and send it back to them so they could see what we're doing. I also, because I'm secretly a hipster apparently. Oh no. Okay. I also took a film camera. I took my little Minolta film camera. I had Portra 400 and ProView 100, and I decided to make some shots with that. But you also see, didn't always turn out real great. You see how badly blown out this one is. But this one I think looks just about perfect. I love that rich blue there in the sky from the portrait. Well, it was an interesting lesson. For all the other film stuff I've shot, really, I've just been photographing the boys just for fun. So it was interesting for me to shoot landscapes with it too. So after that day at, well, that long morning essentially at Lone Pine, then I had to drive the 2 hours back. Remember the map. It was 2 hours from Vegas to Death Valley, another 2 hours from Death Valley to Lone Pine. But I drove the other 2 hours back to come back to the resort. It is called Death Valley, but there is water. There's enough water to sustain Native American peoples there for many thousands of years. And there's also enough water to be able to sustain 2 different resort areas. I stayed at, I never came to I stayed at the ranch here. And that's the inn, actually, it's way back there. That's the significantly more expensive accommodations. It was an interesting exercise in the problems of monopolies. The same company owns both. They bought the land, they have not leased it. And it could do, shall we say, some investment, but it's the only option. The only other option is to stay 45 minutes away in, I can't remember what the little town is over in Nevada. But if you want to stay in somewhere in Death Valley and you don't bring your own accommodations, this is where you stay. It wasn't bad, it was just more expensive than I think it should have been. But the first day we got up and, hey look, mud cracks. This was a neat place to go see for the very first day. That is, that's the Telescope Peak. I forget which mountain range that is back there. But I like that. It looks kind of like a Star Wars Star Destroyer over there. But this was a fun place to start off because you can see the whole grandeur of Death Valley. It was also a really tough place to start off because it's so much there. It was really hard to find a composition I liked. And just walking out there and just not knowing where to look and all that. But the mud cracks are still provide a really neat pattern, and I like the scene back there behind.
Daddy,
Yes.
was the last picture you showed us a drone shot?
Yes, very good. So my son asked if this is a drone shot. Yes, but not my drone. I just stole this one from their website. It's marketing material. It's on their website.
In that photo, it doesn't look, it kind of looks like
Which one?
nothing's growing there, but
This one.
I don't know if
This
there
one.
is on those mountains.
That's a great question. So what was fun is, as I'll show you when we went to Ubi, that's actually what it's called. I love saying that mountain. We actually saw we climbed significantly. We saw the vegetation change. But here, no, it's very, very arid. And yes, there are plants up there, but they're not much. It's not the like Colorado style alpine, coniferous tree cover. That's, yeah, great question. Not much vegetation anywhere, which is actually part of what makes it so special. Erosion happens really rapidly by erosion standards here because there's no plants that lock everything in place. It's a great question. But this, actually right here, this scree right here, and you can see just a little bit of it over here. That was actually had come down the mountains behind me, where I have my back to them. Excuse me, in just a month and a half before, about 6 weeks before, that had a big rainstorm come through, which is actually what had washed all this scree down the mountainside. And then it also helped to make all these mud tiles too. So it was still in the process of drying out because it's still rather moist by Death Valley standards when we were there. Well, this is another film shot, and I like this one because as I was trying to find something to shoot for, as I was trying to find something to shoot in mudflats, I found this wonderful blue rock. It's large, it's larger than a softball, and it's this wonderful shade of blue. I think that blue came through really nice on this film photo. And I said, well, let's get a dinosaur egg. So had to have some fun with get over the dinosaur egg. Yeah, I love that. Michael's posing with it. But I just like that as a subject of interest right there. And I did not take it with me, but it was sitting in a screen pile. So I felt free to just pick it up and move it around wherever I wanted to. It was just a natural prop I found. But like I said, as pretty as it was, you don't ever take anything with pictures out of a national park and your trash. So I left it there. But anyway, it was really fun to play with. As you can see, I had fun with my teddy buddy. He was protecting the dinosaur egg. The mud flats were, like I said, I've said it before, they were a neat place to shoot, but they were really tough because without something to anchor your attention, you just wind up with light just kind of glaze over all that. And you look back here, and even those, because the light's not spectacular, unfortunately, the color of the sky didn't render very well on the projector. It's just not much to anchor the photo for what I'm looking for. Well, so that was the morning of the first day. Well, the evening of the first day, we were going to the sand dunes. The sand dunes are the reason I really wanted to go there. I mentioned those names, Nick Page and Michael Shainbloom, and they have an amazing, well, they each have videos. There's 2 videos on YouTube from their trip together to Death Valley for sand dunes, and they're absolutely gorgeous. I love them. I worked in Saudi Arabia for a couple of years, so, okay, fine, I've seen a lot of sand dunes, but these were really pretty. So pretty, in fact, that I dragged my family last June, hey, and Mom and Michael remember this, out to Colorado to Great Sand Dunes National Park, which is not the same thing. So Great Sand Dunes are enormous. I'll show you the sand dunes that we went to. These sand dunes start at something like 8,000, 9,000 feet above sea level. So a whole lot less atmosphere above you. And the tallest one is 732 feet. And it takes a very long walk to get there. That even has a moat. It's hideous to go visit. It is absolutely exhausting. So my wife was very worried when I told her I was going to go photograph sand dunes in Death Valley. Look at it, they're so cute, they're little baby sand dunes. There are some big ones, but they're much farther out in the park. So where we are is the easiest to get to sand dunes. It's called the Mesquite Sand Dunes. I should include the map now. It's basically right smack in the middle of the park. The road cuts by on the east, down around the southwest. It kind of forms a V around the base of them, but they stretch off to the north for miles. So they keep going, and farther north, they actually do get pretty tall. But where we were, and the tallest one maybe 35, 40 feet. So they're tall enough to be really pretty, but they're short enough to not, be terrifying and worried you're going to die.
So is there any wind there with these dunes or not?
There is a ton of wind, but we got lucky. We didn't actually have very much while we were there. We like the wind on the dunes, and assuming, of course, you're not eating it, it does get in your face and doesn't destroy your camera, because you can just see this pattern right here. That's the wind that makes that. What photographers pray for is the day before you go out, you pray for a good windstorm to blow all the footprints away. Because we did not park at the car park. Death Valley is kind of unusual, unlike like Rocky Mountain National Park, for example, where they have very small, very defined places where you can park. Death Valley, don't drive out onto what little vegetation there is, but you can park anywhere and just go walk. You can see forever. There's very little vegetation to disturb. There are very few wildlife to disturb. So it's essentially a giant photographer sandbox. Get it as a pun. Anyway. So yes, we parked, we walked 3/4, maybe a mile to get to some essentially undisturbed parts of the dunes. And then we just kept walking on in. We were far enough away. We didn't bother anybody. We were part of our own little group. This is my friend Steven right here. I just like that one for contrast with the cloud up there. But of course, you see all our footprints as we're walking along. Yes, this was really fun. And what I was looking for is shots, something like what I had seen from the photographers I enjoy so much, these abstract shots, the curves, the tones. And so I'm just going to walk through these. I like how that one turned out. Yeah, this one is actually taken from like right over there where he was. Standing, just pointing in different directions. You saw he was pointing more north, I was pointing more straight, well, I guess kind of southwest, considering it's January. But I liked how this one turned out. You got the bit of the sun rays, the reflections in the lens, but you also have the wonderful patterns of the mountains back there. It was shall we say, a target-rich environment, which was actually part of the issue. Since I had all zoom lenses, I had essentially infinite composition to everywhere I looked. I could zoom in, zoom out, and turn all the way around to photograph, which makes it really tough to photograph. You have to figure out what, you just stand there and study, but the sun's going down. So it's almost anxiety inducing because you know this light's not going to last. And when the light changes, well, then your shot's gone. So it's a matter of trying to find something that you like and figure out how to shoot that. This one I thought turned out really well. I love the long shadows leading through, leading back on in. But again, we still have those mountains out there. There is in Death Valley, think back to the big map again, looks like a big hand. There's a mountain range on the east side, mountain range on the west side, mountain range in the middle. So there's mountain ranges most directions that you look, and they do provide a really striking background. What else gets really striking is what happens when the sun truly does go down. Now you get the wonderful sky glow. I would have been happy staying out there longer, but it was tiring to get out there. So this was one of my last shots of the evening on the dunes, because now you can see how different the colors are. This is sometime after sunset. I think it's about 20 minutes after sunset. So it's a fairly long exposure, but again, I got a tripod, I don't care. Just line it up, figure out how to focus. Yeah, focusing on the sand dunes was interesting. All focus systems use contrast, difference between light and dark. Well, I was trying to get to focus out in here, and that worked out okay, but there were some other shots that I wanted to try to shoot where I actually went in and manually focused because my camera was struggling. Thought that was interesting. I had never had that problem before. Yes.
I'm looking at it on the computer screen. There's way more blue in this photo. I think for some reason the projector's making everything look more red. you know?
Okay.
So I just wanted to mention that so that people aren't misled.
Would it help to turn off the lights?
I don't think so. I think it's upsetting on the projector that we need to fix for next time. Anyway,
No, and that actually brings up a good point. The colors some of the colors were so pale or subdued, it's interesting to look at them on my computer screen versus my phone screen versus like my work computer screen versus this. The colors do change a little bit. So that's something to keep in mind when you guys give a presentation or want to print. The colors change a bit. That's okay. Make sure before you do spend the money on a big print, get a little test print. I've learned that repeatedly. More pretty sand dune patterns. I like this abstract with the waves leading out there. Hey. So then again, this is fun with focal lengths. How Michael's holding up Geralt again. I hardly moved at all with this. I just moved enough to make sure I liked where the composition was. But my iPhone 12 Pro Max has three different lenses. It has an ultra wide, about 13 millimeters equivalent, the standard lens, which is actually 26 millimeter equivalent, and then a 77 millimeter equivalent. So I shot the same scene with all three, and you can see how different they all feel. I don't know which one's your favorite. Mike, which one's your favorite?
This one has the green background.
And that's fun because he said he likes this lens flare right there. Photographers probably wouldn't ordinarily like that. You can see the lens elements reflecting just a little bit. There's the little hot spot right there. That's the lens elements reflecting inside of itself. And he likes it here, and I don't disagree. I think that's my favorite out of these shots too. But it was really fun to have something as simple as my phone and something as adorable as a teddy bear to just play. My group members and all the instructors thought it was adorable and hilarious. I was carrying around a teddy bear. I had a pullover jacket with a big kangaroo pouch pocket. So Geralt was always just in the kangaroo pouch pocket, just looking everywhere. So I had my little mascot with me, and it was just fun to play with. Okay, so I keep extolling the virtues of tripods. You know, tripods aren't very good when there's wind. This is a really beautiful place called Artist's Palette. And this was a really tough morning. It was the windiest, we're going back to the wind question. This was the windiest morning we had. But the problem was, yes, Michael?
I like all the blue up here.
Yes, and that's some, okay, thank you. It was the windiest morning we had. And the problem is, even my good tripod with really good ball head, since I was trying to use my long lens, the long lens was vibrating slightly. And when I'm at an eighth of a second, half a second, quarter second exposure, stuff was blurry. I was having a problem. All of us were having problems with it. It was a matter of making the tripod as short as you can and trying to protect it with your body to break the wind. And I was still having issues, which is disappointing because like Michael said, this is really special because of all these wonderful colors. Yeah. Death Valley is, like I said, has some really neat geology. And there's a place called 20 Mule Team Canyon, which I unfortunately didn't get to go to. called 20 Mule Team Canyon because that's how long the mule teams were that came up from Mojave to mine borax in Death Valley 100 years ago or so. There are lots and lots of minerals, but mercifully, none of the really precious stuff, which is why this was able to get turned into a national park rather than a national disgrace. But yes, as much as I love tripods, do be careful. Make sure you always chimp on the back of your camera. Of course, you can't do that with film. Make sure it's sharp, and if it's not, figure out why and go work on it. So there we are. There's me and Geralt again. Just for, so this is, there we go. That's the area we just saw in the previous picture. And this one is interesting because you see how low contrast it is. Well, that's because the sun hadn't hit it yet. The sun was still behind. As soon as the sun comes out, the colors get washed out. So that was a tough morning. Not exactly my kind of photography with this kind of ice cream mess from Brahms kind of coloration right here,
Mhm.
and with a less defined scene. Some of my friends did get some neat pictures that they really liked, but it wasn't necessarily my preferred style. My preferred style is for this. Nothing wrong with this one. I think I got some shots they really like, but I liked having the variety in such a small area in Death Valley. This is a Brisky Point, and you can see how neat the geological formations are. The whole thing, it's a massive upthrust that's eroded. Zabriskie Point may be the single most famous location. That is the point. It's actually not Manly Beacon, this whole area. We're standing at Zabriskie Point. This may be the most famous scene, but unfortunately, the light was okay. It wasn't great. So the other problem with photographers is that's photographer. So this is a film shot. This was with my Provia, not nearly enough dynamic range to see it. Okay, fine, whatever. I thought it was fun just because you can see a whole lot of people and a whole lot of three-legged things out there hanging around. It was interesting because since I was with my photography group and actually two other photography groups all went out to here. So like 30 of us in the conference in this one place. And then all the non-photographers would come up and they'd all look at us like we're really weird. We are. It's okay. Yes, Michael.
Picture looks really pretty.
Yes, it does. That is actually, Michael said that it looks really green, and he's right. Does it look green on the screen too there, Sam?
Not, I mean, it looks more blue on the screen
Okay.
now.
That is a function of the film I used, the Provia. And it's an interesting learning experience. But yeah, this wasn't my only shot. That was one of my digital cameras, of course. But yeah, just more fun with film, more learning about it. But still, I love the combination of the film photo and also getting all the photographers. This is not a film shot. This was a single exposure. And yes, I had to work on it in post. You see that it's still really brightly cooked. So we did have some really pretty color, but it was really tough to use just given our vantage point above Zabriskie Point. Still, I thought it was a neat area, like all those patterns. We had this bit of a quiet leading line down there, leads back over to it. Just a pretty one that night. We stayed there for a while. This was actually taken pretty late. This was a high ISO, high sensitivity shot that I was able to get just as we were leaving. I really liked how the shadows cast by the already set sunlight playing on the landscape here. It's not a pretty sky as well up there. This is an out of camera JPEG from Fuji that I borrowed on the trip, which was fun. I made I made an Ektar kind of like simulation with the very rich colors. And I thought that was fun. Not everything needs to be really heavily processed. Later, if you get that processing done in camera. Of course, there's me and Teddy again. It was especially interesting being around a bunch of non-photographers when I was carrying around a teddy bear. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this also shows you how differently, like a camera, like one of my big cameras, film camera, big camera, rendered versus my cell phone. Again, the cell phone does really well with the exposure for me, but then tries to get all this dynamic range into something that can be seen on the screen. It's very flat, not much contrast across that back part of the picture, but I think it did okay. So this is fun. UB pronounce exactly how it looks, right? Crater. This is a steam explosion, not a volcano, not a meteor impact. This is a steam explosion. I still do. That is an hour and a half north of where we stayed. So now you can actually see a bit of vegetation down there. I have some more pictures of vegetation there, creosote bushes. But this is another example of post-processing because the sky was so much brighter than down here and I didn't have any neutral density filters to help even that out. Yes, Michael.
Did you get to go in it?
No, I did not get to go in it. It's a lot farther down than you may think from this one. It is some hundreds of feet, quite steeply and lousy footing down in there. Good question. So instead of going down, I went up. So I can see this crater. This is actually on the backside. The Ubehebe crater complex is 13 craters. This is the main crater. It's quite deep. But then there are a bunch of other craters around there, all from similar water got in, hit magma, and then exploded. It happened quite recently in geological terms. It was like 8,000, 10,000 years ago, something like that. But I got up here, so I got to see this neat contrast. These are the creosote bushes. Creosote, like the term for the leftover trash up in your fireplace after you burn. But that's what these are called, is creosote bushes. And I like this very alien landscape. This very bright white bottom down here. And it was really bright white. And this very dark, not volcanic, that very dark pulverized ground. I forget what that was. I don't think it's shale. I forget what that mineral was. For this one, I was with Michael Gordon, who has been in Death Valley for many, many years. He knows all there is to know about the geology of it. The problem is not all of it stuck in my head. But I like that. And I also like to zoom in on it to see these interesting patterns with the creosote bushes. Yes, Michael.
That kind of looks like a cat.
Thank you, Michael. I did not notice that. So Michael says that he thinks there's a cat right there in the middle of it. I like that. Thank you, Michael.
So what, a steam explosion, is this a natural phenomenon?
Yes, mercifully it doesn't happen everywhere all the time, but yeah. Because, so Death Valley is formed because the larger land masses are pulling apart. It's not a valley like Royal Gorge, for example, or the Black Canyon, the Gunnison in Colorado, where it's cut, or the Grand Canyon, of course, it's cut by a river. In this case, the land masses are actually pulling apart. Well, that means in some parts of it, the crust is actually quite thin. And in this case, it was thin enough that water was able to get down and come into contact with magma. Well, magma is really, really hot. So it vaporized it, caused an enormous explosion that created this whole complex. It wasn't a single explosion like on a day that created the 13 craters or whatever it is, but it occurred very close together in geological terms. Yes.
What was the word you used if the water got into what caused it?
Magma, the liquid rock.
Lava, it hasn't exploded yet.
Yeah. What's the term? Lava is the term for the stuff that's out on the surface. Magma is the term for the same stuff underground.
So how tall are these bushes?
Oh, good question. A couple feet. Right, yeah, maybe a couple feet, 18 inches. The desert that I saw coyotes. I saw a number of little lizards. I saw actually quite a few birds. No bugs. I don't remember, which was actually kind of nice. No bugs. But there is life in Death Valley. There is water in Death Valley to support that life. And then you can see it all around the wall of this crater, these bushes that are a foot, 18 inches, 2 feet tall, depending on. They grow really, really slow, just like the tundra up in the top of Rocky Mountain National Park. Not much water means it grows slow. That's okay.
What is the temperature when you're there, like now?
Oh, good question. It is definitely a whole lot warmer now. When we were there, this was our coldest morning. Looking out over there, and it was also we had a bit of a breeze too. No trees to break up the breeze, but it was 40s with a breeze. So the Californians were all freezing to death, and I'm like, I got a jacket on, there, right? But then in the day, it would get up to very pleasant, actually rather like today, as a matter of fact. Today's got up to 70, 72, something like that, with a bit of a breeze. Felt a whole lot like my experience in Death Valley. Here we go. Here's another shot of Death Valley. I think, I don't remember actually. This may be a film shot. You see how the film rendered this really well. Yeah, over here is a bit exposed. This is the Provia slide film again. But you see it exposed really well for this darker part because there's simply more light. Up there in the top, that just got blown out. And it's the sun.
So when is it 110 degrees in Death Valley?
Gets up to 110 degrees in Death Valley in the summertime. Don't visit the summertime.
Mm-hmm.
Right now in Death Valley, it's probably getting up to mid 80s, but it's a dry heat. I worked in Saudi Arabia. I don't care. It's a dry heat. Ethan, no. So anyway, sorry, lots of cat herding going on. So right now it's warmer, still very pleasant. Don't go in July and August, please. Just don't go. they have signs everywhere. I'll show you a sign at the very end of it that they have up there. Very serious about just don't be dumb. Anyway, so January, it was beautiful, a bit breezy. Here's a film shot. Hey, look, like I said, some wildlife. Michael Gordon, our instructor guide that day, is convinced that's the same pair of ravens who follow him around the park. And given how close he got to these two, I'm not inclined to disagree with him. This, I love how this turned out. So this is that wall back there, this red to yellow right there, with my subject right there. I have a friend of mine at work, I'm gonna make a print of this for her. That was really neat. I got close enough. I got from like me to the owl thing right there. If I had any food, it would have come to my hand. And yes, you're not supposed to feed them, but it's Death Valley. What else they gonna eat? So just don't tell anybody. But Michael does feed them just a little bit. And yes, they are friendly and inquisitive and really beautiful up close. And then I also got to do a little bit of a riparian detour. There are there is water, as I've said many times about Death Valley, including little salt marsh. This was actually on the way to Zabriskie Point. This whole area was, I don't know, maybe twice the size of this building. So really quite small. But I loved all these little bitty, and each one of them was the size of the end of my pinky or smaller. But I have the water right here with the macro lens, and I also thought this was neat. Again, come back to the neat minerals they have. You have that little bitty rock right there. That little bitty rock was just really tiny. That was with my macro lens. And it was fun to go photograph something completely different, from a massive crater to entire area that's smaller than we shoot. It was just fun to have that experience in the same place and so conveniently. So that night we went out to Badwater Basin. There's a whole lot of clouds. Badwater Basin is famous for these saltwater, these salt polygons. They are table salt, sodium chloride. The water comes down like, well, things like the Dead Sea in Israel and Jordan, but that evaporates. Salt comes down here and it concentrates, the water all goes away. And somehow it leaves these amazing polygons. I've seen some really cool shots here, especially from the people, who have the great good fortune to live in Death Valley year round. They can get down there right when it's raining, or right after training. These things fill up and you wind up with this surreal mirror with these poorly defined edges reflecting amazing colors in the sky. Yeah, we didn't have that. So I was kind of bored. There's Gail right there. But that's also to give you a sight. When you see how big the teddy is, and I can lay down at some of these polygons. They're so big. They are large. They will cut the heck out of you if you fall down. So do be very careful. And of course, it'll hurt because now you got salt in the wound too. But yes, these things are huge. You can see one's cracked right here. Kind of mud. The brown color is mud that's seeped up in. But still, it was fun. We were just playing around. And then, oh my, the sky kicked off. These clouds over here were looking really oppressive. So I was just basically playing around. And then we started to get a little bit of color, a little bit more color. And then, oh my, this incredible color above us. So it was a matter of running around trying to find a composition. Like, what is interesting in the foreground? Clearly, the sky is incredible, but I'm at Badwater Basin with this sky. I've got to find something. So I found this, what I think is this neat wheel right here. Had a bit of the red glow reflecting. And I was able to capture that. It's easily my favorite trip, my favorite photo from the trip. We got so lucky to be able to catch that. All of us came away with shots we were really pleased with. And this particular one, I was really glad I had my ultra wide lens on there. This is actually a borrowed camera, but I can get to that later if you guys are interested. But this one was really fun and surprisingly easy to photograph with the modern sensor, because as bright as this looks, it wasn't too bright, and as dark as that looks, there's still detail in it. If I want to bring it up, but I prefer to keep it nice and dark for the contrast in it. But yes, these are the Badwater Basin photos. So that's the big Fuji GFX, and that's my cell phone. I appreciate the attempt, shall we say. But of course, I also had to get Carol's in there too. Checking that one out. That's with the cell phone as well. But again, it was interesting to compare the different formats. Then after that, incredible sunrise. Now, this our last morning is the Dunes sunrise. And we went out to very close to the same place where we caught sunset. But now the sun's coming up from a very different perspective. So now we get to enjoy the magical transformation as it goes from dark to light. And that one was a buddy of mine captured that as I was sitting there taking this photo. He got that one of me, and I I'm very grateful for that. So the dunes change color as the light comes onto them. They are natively, yeah, basically the color of my pants, beige. But with the light, yes, Mike.
Is that snow?
Why, thank you. No, it is not snow. That is the sand dunes. That's those very same sand dunes. But because the contrast is extremely low, I could let it have a very long exposure to get lots of information. And this isn't exactly what it looked like coming out of camera, but this is not much of an edit coming out of my big Nikon. I found this neat composition and I just took advantage of the very soft contrast. So you can see all these wonderful patterns back in there, along with the texture. And again, you can see the bushes way out there in that top rim. But no, it's not snow, it is sand. It's those same sand dunes. And then as the sun was coming up a little bit more, we got the light changed some. But this one is interesting because this one I pushed the contrast just to play with it in my post-processing software. Now you see I get these kind of peculiar dark spots, which I don't really see here. Maybe right there, maybe here. But this was an interesting one just to kind of make it appear out of a picture that just didn't have much natively. Then there's more patterns. Again, just a matter of what's interesting. How do you want to photograph it? And then the sun came up. Got very golden. That's part of my group over there. I was enjoying these just perfect leading lines I have leading out into the scene right there. This time without the people. Came back with a lot of photos for a landscape photography trip. Yes, ma'am.
When you're out there, did you ever shift? Is it dangerous? Did you get?
The dunes?
You mean get lost in them? Or like the sand collapse on you?
Right.
The sand is difficult to walk on, but it will stop eventually. Just the main issue is the fact that it's exhausting just to walk on it because you take a step and you sink down, you got to pull back up. But no, the sand, I never felt unsafe with them. You see how gentle some of the slopes are. Some of the slopes are steeper. Tackle what you're comfortable with. And just remember, one big advantage of these dunes is because they are much shorter than like great sand dunes, for example. If you get confused as to direction, walk up to the top of the dune, you can see over most of them. And you go, oh wait, my car's parked over that way. So yes, these are as visitor friendly. These are much more visitor friendly than big sand dunes, right, Roxy?
Yeah, did you already tell them?
Oh yeah, I told about how you were terrified I was going to do something stupid in these dunes. No, these were sorry, I'm silly. I can't say stupid because of the way. Anyway, so yes, these dunes were wonderful and it was fun to be out there, and it was a lot of long lens use. I talked about the 3 lenses I brought: the ultra wide, the standard, which actually went out to pretty long, and then the really long lens. And I wound up using a lot to try to get these. And even then, this isn't exactly long. This is like 50 millimeters. But it was fun to have that variety: fairly wide, a bit longer, quite wide. Heavy crop right here, getting the dune effect. Gotta get right up behind my little Geralt friend right there as well. I love the sense of scale that he provides. And then I got these as well. These are with long lens, finding something pretty. I cut off the background. So only those of us who are out there actually knows how big that scene is. But that was a fun one. And then I also got to try some black and white too. Don't know which one I like better, but I think this one turned out spectacularly. I'm trying to convince my wife to find somewhere in the house to put it up. Ooh. So the conclusion: Death Valley is absolutely worth it. It is quite easy to get to. I mean, we're just flying into Vegas. Lots of things going to Vegas. Turns out there are lots of national parks around Vegas. And in November, again, because I have a very generous wife, I get to go to Zion National Park, which is 2 hours the other direction. No, actually 3 hours the other direction from Vegas. So yes, it's worth it. Flew out, got a rental car. It's only 2 hours from Vegas. That's nothing. And it was a wonderful experience. The out of Chicago group, it was interesting because of the California COVID restrictions, because of the resort itself. It was more than I would have spent if I had gone with a smaller group, and it was certainly far more than I would have spent if I'd gone just by myself or just my wife and I. But at the same time, we were out there with people who knew it really well. They knew where to go, what time to be there, and that's worth a lot. I'm quite sure I couldn't have found that by myself. And well, the Badwater, that's just lucky. But it was also fun to have Colleen there to help me remember to focus on the foreground, like concentrate on the foreground, figure out what's actually interesting in this. So the Out of Chicago group was worth it. There was a wide age range. There were some folks there who were younger than I am, and a number of folks there who were much older than I am. So that was fun too. And every group had every mix of ages too. But I also appreciate that now I know a number of workshops I want to attend. With that variety of instructors, I was able to meet so many, and the people I'm going to design with are actually on that initial slide, Jennifer Renwick and David Kingham. I'll be going to design with them. So that was a really valuable, neat experience to be able to talk to so many of them. Do always take a variety of focal lengths unless you are trying to limit yourself with primes. Zooms are good, especially for big trips like this. Don't confine yourself to 35 or 50 or 85 millimeters. Yeah, maybe your favorite. Take more than that. And also be aware of every direction. Be sure to turn around. So then back to the Death Valley question. Monitoring dehydration. Not so much a concern in January, I guess, to drink, but you'll be okay. But yeah, this is actually a sign posted up in all the bathrooms about monitoring the color of your urine. If it gets real dark, you're in real trouble. People die in Death Valley with a disturbing frequency. Please go in the wintertime. That's what I got. Take this one out. All right, guys. Yes.
Are you using any polarizers or filters or
Oh.
anything?
Good question. He asked if I'm using any polarizers or filters. No, actually. I don't even, well, yeah, I don't ever use my one graduated ND. My digital sensors don't care. They're good if they don't care. I didn't bother to use my 6-stop ND for a long exposure. And the polarizer, I tried, but I never saw much of a difference. It's not like when I was in Monument Valley, where there was an enormous difference looking at the red rocks. With this, I just didn't think it was worth it. But it's a good question. I'm glad I had them to try to play with. But no, I never saw any difference. Just, the best way to test a polarizer is just hold it up and rotate it. I never saw any value.
Of course, they're more for water.
Yeah, exactly. Water, get rid of water vapor, yeah.
The evening time to draw the show and
Yeah,
tell.
when you live in
So what?
Michael.
In the evening time at the hotel, did you have show and tell?
Oh, did we have show and tell? No. It's a great question, but by the time we got back from sunset shoots, which usually involved a hike back to the car and then a drive back, and then we're getting up really early the next morning. I don't know that anybody had any energy. Middle of the day we could have, but instead we actually had table talk. We had table talk time with our instructors, and along with where we'd all sit around in small groups, and there was a broader, like, big panel discussion. And that's what we did in the middle of the day. But no, good question. Any
So
other questions?
basically, Death Valley is brown.
Well, yes.
Some snow, some.
Well, for the most part it is, but then half the year Kansas is too. The other half of the year Kansas is great. So, yeah, but one of the neatest things about Death Valley though is how the light changes over it.
Yeah.
Because with this scene right here, this scene is very similar, very close to that one. The images feel completely different.
Oh, yeah.
And so long as you get out there early enough, which is perpetually my issue, staying out late enough is never the issue, it's getting out early enough, where you can get set up to take advantage as the light changes, you can get some really wonderful shots. I think it was Sarah Marino, one of the instructors we had, she lives out there. She just set her camera up and she had to take pictures every like 10 minutes for 2 hours, an hour before sunset to an hour after sunset. And what was cool is you got essentially the color of the rainbow minus green, but you got red or very red orange all the way into purple for photographing the same scene. She picked out a spot on a dune, just left the camera there with a very long interval, and that was really neat to see how the colors on these change. And this is the best example. The dunes are the best example of where the color changes because they are so inevitably neutral. This is basically how it rendered out of my camera. Oh, actually, okay. This is basically how it rendered out of my digital camera with but the color, the strong gold color is very much what I remember too. And yeah, I can play with it in post, but I like to keep it representative of what I remember. And when the light first started, when the sun first started to come up, yeah, it was very pale. More questions?
Michael,
Yes, Ed.
So you lived in Saudi Arabia. I'm wondering, I feel like, yeah, in the movies, it seems like there are like the deep desert where there are dunes as far as the eye can see. Did you ever get out into that in Saudi Arabia? And or is
Yes,
that exaggerated?
Yes, well, yes and no. So Saudi Arabia is enormous. And on the west coast, where most of the people live, it's very much like California. The mountains are shorter, but there are mountains, there is rain, there are crops, and people can live there. In the oil field where I was, it is beige, the color of my pants as far as the eye can see. And yeah, we did have camels walking past the site.
They're
frequently.
beige too.
Yes. And you know what else are beige? Camel spiders. You want to have some nightmares? Go look up about camel spiders.
Oh,
Anyway, I had the great good fortune to fly out. There were some issues. Actually, there were some issues out south of UAE, United Arab Emirates. I had to fly out there. It's quite a long flight. It's hundreds of miles out there. And that is a perfectly flat pan with colossal red sand dunes sitting on top of it. Much larger than I think even great sand dunes. But what's interesting about those are, it's not dune to dune. It's dune, flat pan, dune, flat pan, dune, flat pan. Unfortunately, my great regret from that is I was not a photographer when I was out there. Because I would have loved to have made some photos from those, because those dunes were staggering, hundreds and hundreds of feet tall everywhere. They'd cut a path through with heavy equipment for the roads, then they'd have a well that they'd drill out in a spider web or in not a spider web, a Mercedes 3-pointed star to go tap the oil under there. Then they'd go over to another one and do the same thing. But yeah, Saudi Arabia was spectacular. I don't recommend visiting them.
Is
Unless
there
you have
any
a-
water under all of this? You know, like we got water underneath
like
here.
groundwater?
Oh, absolutely. That's what sustains the little riparian area. Much of it is salt water, but there are freshwater. I mean, even under us, there are saltwater layers, there are freshwater layers under us, depending on how far down you want to go. And there are salt and freshwater layers there in Death Valley. Just most of the water, the water that comes to the surface is almost entirely salt water. But there are plants. I didn't include any pictures here. I thought it went long enough. They're called dead man's fingers or pickleweed. Look, it's a pinky. The plant grows into a shape into sticks. And then it sequesters the salt into stems or branches that wind up looking like a finger. Then it just cuts it off and dies. And that part of the plant dies, while the rest of it continues to grow. That's how it deals with the salt. Salinity would kill any other plant known. They're very special little plants that grow there. That's not the creosote. That was around the water issue. Any other questions, guys? Yes, sir.
Were there astronomers that went out as a part of the group for the night shots?
Oh, astrophotographers? That was a very interesting topic because Death Valley, there are very, very few people in that 5,000 square miles. So it is an international dark sky park. And in the lead up to it, the head guy, Chris Smith, I think was his name, Chris something, he said, yes, there's going to be opportunities for astrophotography. Then on the very first night, he said, nah, we're not going to do astrophotography. There were a number of the attendees who were very displeased about that. Because astrophotography, for those of you who don't know, you can use, shall we say, conventional ultra wide angle. There are two different types. There's deep field where you set up a long lens and go shoot Andromeda or something. You can do that anywhere you have dark sky. For what's really good out there is ultra wide angle lens, but a very fast lens. You get ultra wide, it's not cheap. Fast is not cheap. Ultra wide and ultra fast, those are really not cheap and big and heavy. So people brought out gear specifically to do that. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. There were a number of us who were displeased. So I actually went out myself to go do a little bit of astrophotography. But by that point, again, getting back to the question about show and tell, I was too tired to really go out very far. But yes, you absolutely can. In heck, I'd recommend it. But in that case, what I said before about easy back to your car, yeah, that goes out the window. Take a GPS watch, make sure you know where your car is, have plenty of water, tell people when you're going to be back, because that gets real dangerous going out there in the dunes in the dark. Not from rattlesnakes, from maybe getting lost and dying. All right, anybody else? Who's ready to go to Death Valley?
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah.
That'd be next family trip, right, Roxy? But yes, it is a wonderful place to visit. And make sure if you do visit, give yourself a couple of days there. It's enormous, as I keep talking about. And I only saw a tiny portion right in the middle of it. We didn't get up to Eureka Dunes. We didn't go to Panamint Dunes. We didn't go to Ibex Dunes. We did not go to the racetrack. I did not go to Dante's Dunes. I did not go to Telescope Peak. I did not go to, oh, I forget, it's Albuquerque Point. Those are all the points I can just remember off the top of my head. I didn't get to go. Clearly, I need to go back out, I guess, my little guy's game anyway. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.